Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the Campus Dialogues, a Muslim Views production in affiliation with MuslimFin. MuslimFin, your roadmap to Islamic banking and finance. I'm your host, Ali Sali, and here to introduce our guest this evening is my good friend and colleague, Siraj Buzik. Siraj.
Assalamu alaikum, Ali.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, how are you doing, brother?
Always good, always good.
Like I say, another week, another episode.
That's correct, yeah.
And alhamdulillah, tonight we've got a special podcast on tonight. We're actually joined by respected scholar and educator, Sheikh Muhammad Kar, with a rich background in Islamic studies from memorizing the Quran at Darul Ulum Zakaria to earning his Alamiyah degree in Strand and teaching at institutions like Darul Naim. Sheikh Muhammad brings both depth and clarity to complex topics. And in this episode, we're taking a step back to explore the basics of Islamic finance. And what makes it different from conventional finance, why is interest prohibited, and how can everyday Muslims make financial choices that align with their faith. And whether you're starting a journey into Islamic finance or looking to refresh your understanding, this conversation will help you grasp the key principles, practical tools, and ethical foundations that guide financial decision making in Islam. Malaka, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Malaka, we're quite excited to have you in studio. I think we've been trying to get you on the podcast for quite some time. So we wanted to say shukran for the time. We're quite excited to jump into it. We've got a very interesting topic, Islamic finance. It's not new. We can't say it's new anymore. It's been around for a bit. But I still feel that there's some, perhaps misunderstanding around Islamic finance. What does it mean? How does it fit in? But perhaps as a starting point, perhaps Malaki maybe just give us some background to Maulana's upbringing and Maulana's studies, inshallah.
Shukran for honoring me with the invitation. I'm deeply honored here to be with Alisa, my cousin, and with your honorable self. And so thank you for the opportunity. And I do apologize for dodging you people.
We understand Maulana's extremely busy, so whatever time we do get, we really appreciate it.
Allah bless you, and may this be a means of goodness, inshallah. And I do enjoy coming to platforms like these. I consider it a platform of learning. I consider though we're going to keep it very easy, inshallah, and informal and conversational, but with all of its informality, it's still a gathering of learning and teaching, where we seek to acquire such knowledge that guide us along the straight path. And coming up the stairs, I say, subhanallah, these gatherings of learning takes on different formats these days, and sometimes the unconventional, from a traditional point of view, formats, they are sometimes the most effective. And I think that's very important, particularly when we're talking about Islamic finance. What do we have? We have this great tradition which started in the Quran in the way of the Prophet ﷺ. It was crystallized in many forms. But somehow or the other, perhaps an unintended negative consequence of the crystallization of our tradition has created this gap between our tradition and practicality. And so we need to bring that practicality, we need to bring our tradition in terms of Quran and Sunnah back to the cutting edge of life, the cutting edge which we basically call life, so making things relevant. And like a podcast now, the Prophet ﷺ, he went to the different marketplaces in and around Mecca to deliver this message. So I think that is an encouragement for us, that whatever platforms there are that are available, we may be talking on one platform. Some scholars liken it to the well, we're by the well, but we have to become like the rainwater that you go everywhere. So we need to apply ourselves to those platforms that people are actually engaging in. So inshallah, may this be one of those platforms, and we, our community can benefit, and I'm sure they are benefiting bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala through you people.
Well, I'm going to kick it off with something very, we consider it basic, but I think the core theme of the topic, what is Islamic finance? Why is it something like Islamic finance? Is it something new? Is it something that was in the traditions? Have we categorized it differently? What is Islamic finance?
Myself and Alisa was talking about something earlier on, and it reminded me about when the Prophet ﷺ, when he came from Mecca to Medina. So at the immigration, when he came to Medina, so Mecca is a mercantile city. They do business. So we know the reference in Quran in terms of the journey to the south to Yemen and the journey to the north to the Levant. So they were business people, they used to trade. When the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, Medina was more of an oasis, if you wanted to, an agricultural basket, if you wanted to, and date palms and vineyards and so forth. So the Prophet ﷺ comes to Medina, and what does he find? What do he discover? He discovers that they are forward buying certain commodities. So we were discussing the whole idea of that when we enter into the finance space, are we going to impede things, stop everything? This is haram, that's haram, and that's haram. No. If you look at the approach of the Prophet ﷺ, he came to Medina and he found that they were forward buying. So in Arabic it's called salam, to forward buy. So all he did was he didn't abolish forward buying. Forward buying is where you pay up front and you receive the goods at the later stage. So contractually it is a bit risky because you're paying now and then you're going to receive the goods at harvest. Okay. So there is a degree of risk therein. So the Prophet ﷺ, he looks at the contract, he doesn't abolish it, he basically regulates it. So he says that, look, if you forward buying and you're buying upfront, and then you at least according to the Shafi school of thought, so then you must pay the monies upfront, and then the nature of the goods must be known completely, and the point of delivery must be known completely. But be it as it may, the contract is not our point. The point is the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina. He found that they were trading in a particular way. He didn't abolish it. He didn't impede it. He simply regulated it. Now, so you asked the question about Islamic finance. So how does this story tie into Islamic finance? I mentioned it because of Islam doesn't impede things, but rather Islam regulates things. Islam doesn't want to stop things, but Islam serves as that very impetus for growth, as opposed to the conception out there. Sometimes we think that if we're going to move from conventional to Islamic, we're moving from the vast to the narrow. No, you're moving from narrow to the vast. Islam opens up things, so there's no point of impeding. But this example also, what came to my mind now is, this example explains Islamic finance. So if you look at the two terms, Islamic finance. So I like to look at it because if you in Arabic, what happens is al-mu'amala al-maliyya al-mu'asara. So it's basically, it reads as finance Islamic. So let's just look at it like that, finance Islamic. Let's just call it finance Islamic as opposed to Islamic finance. Okay. So when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, what happened? There was finance. There was these contracts happening. So all he did was he applied Islamic to the finance. And that's exactly what Islamic finance is. It's as simple as that. What Islamic finance is all about is that we find now today, what is finance? Finance is finance revolves around creating money, circulating money, and managing money. And it includes everything else that's happening. Finance is such a broad term. So we find that finance is happening. It happens on basically three levels. It happens in terms of your personal capacity, so personal finance. It happens if you're running a company. Alisa has a company, so that's not personal finance, it's corporate finance. And then you also have public finance, the way government manages finances. So as a Muslim, when I come and I look at the personal finance, I look at the corporate finance, I look at the public finance, what do I ask myself? I put on a Sharia lens and I evaluate, look, permissible or impermissible, permissible, impermissible, permissible, impermissible. It's as simple as that. And you find in most instances when you apply the rules of Islam, let's call it a filter, and this filters into three groups: a grey area, permissible, impermissible. You find that most are going to fall into the permissible area because that's the default when it comes to financial dealings from the outset. So finance Islamic is a very simple thing. It's what the Prophet ﷺ did there. He just applied that Sharia lens because the Sharia has certain rules. Subhanallah, scholars differ as to exactly when riba was proscribed. Some say, and I sort of incline to this view, that it was prohibited very early on. And maybe we can talk a bit about that later. But other scholars say, no, it was very late, like in the 7th or 8th year after Hijrah and so forth. So what happened was the Prophet ﷺ came and he saw there was a mode of financing. What was that? People were lending money and then charging interest, a stipulated positive return on the principal amount. So when the Prophet ﷺ looked at that finance and he applied the Islamic principles to them, right? And then that type of finance fell into the impermissible bracket. But there are only few like that that falls into that particular bracket. So that's what Finance Islamic is all about. Us looking at the finance and applying an Islamic lens. Why do we apply Islamic lens? I was reading a book now the other day. It talks about what makes Islamic finance different. They were talking about Islamic economics. What makes Islamic economics different? What makes it very different is the fact that it has a religious element to it. So as a Muslim, as an adherent to Islam, and what is Islam? Islam is not a religion. Islam is a complete way of life. You know, so it's a complete way of life. So what happens is that it's not limited to one sphere of life. It covers all aspects of our lives. So what happens is the unique thing about us as Muslims is that we have a set of rules and regulations that apply to our finance as well. And that's what makes us different. If you look, I'm not too knowledgeable about it, but if you look at conventional finance, then it's religion, because it operates within a secular environment, then religion doesn't play a role there. But for us, like religion plays a role in every aspect of our lives. It plays a role in our dietary laws. It plays a role in our interpersonal relationship. It also plays a role in terms of finance. And because religion plays a role in our finance, whether we're operating on a personal level, on a corporate level, or on a public level, because religion plays a role, it gives rise to this phenomenon called Islamic finance.
Malala, you make a very interesting point. I think, you know, when we have discussions with the community and with our clients, I think there's somewhat a misconception in terms of Islamic finance. They feel that what the scholars or what the experts have done was they've looked at what we have conventionally, and we've just basically replicated that and coined it Islamic, or we've coined the word riba, we changed the word interest to profit. And there's a lot of that going around in our communities, and I feel that is sometimes what is stopping people of actually taking up Islamic finance because of that misunderstanding. What is your thoughts on that, Maulana?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, and that's because of your experience on the ground. What I'm understanding, what you're saying is that people are saying that your Islamic finance product is exactly the same like your conventional product. It's exactly the same thing. Yeah. I had a response in my mind. Now I must think about it.
Yeah.
But it's a question I get asked all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And every time I get asked, and then it's the same answer, but you phrase it in this way, and you phrase it in that way. Look, I can look at it in this way. I think the first thing is the integrity of the Islamic finance products. What do I mean thereby? That the Islamic product is fundamentally, essentially, substantially different from your conventional product in terms of its substance. In terms of its substance. And there are many examples in that regard. I think the simplest example. So in other words, the difference between Islamic finance and conventional finance, the difference is not only in the literals, that we change the literals, we change the terminology, and that's it. So now we're calling the one Islamic finance and we're calling the other one conventional finance. No, that's not. There's a fundamental difference in terms of the underlying structure, underlying contract. And so that's the first thing, and that can be put to the test. For example, if you wanted, let's say, personal finance, So you want to finance the purchase of your car. You go to the conventional bank, what's going to happen is that they're going to lend you the money, right? And then you're going to repay them over time with interest.
Correct.
So the underlying contract there is a loan contract. So the return as a lender, if I'm lending you 100,000 and then I get 100,000 plus, let's say 25,000, that return on a loan is called interest. So that's the conventional space. You come to the Islamic space, what happens is you go to the Islamic bank now. So you also want to finance the purchase of a vehicle. What's going to happen? The bank is going to buy the vehicle. Now, remember, already we're talking about two different contracts. In the conventional space, we were talking about a loan, whereby you borrow money from the bank and you repay them. What's happening now on the Islamic side? We're saying, look, the bank is going to purchase the vehicle, and then the bank is going to resell it to you. So the underlying contract here is a sale. So if you have a sale, if I buy this book for 250 rands, and I resell it to you for 300 rands, then 250 is my cost and 50 rands my profit. Nobody's going to call that interest. You know, so that's important to understand that, and this can be put to the test. one can you know, if you go to the bank and then you look at you examine the contracts that you are signing. What are you selling? You're selling a sale agreement. I mean, some of the scholars actually said that the Sharia-compliant banks shouldn't be called banks, because banks, you know, when you think about banks and you think about loans and so forth, but actually what they're doing is more akin to business than what it is to financing in the conventional sense of the word, because they're buying and they're reselling it to you. Yes, it might be a form of debt financing, but it's based on a sale and not based on a loan. So the claim that they're exactly the same is an unsubstantiated claim. And the reality on the ground proves otherwise. They are fundamentally different contracts, and the literals. And subhanallah, I can say this much, that so much effort gets put into, because it's not easy to change contracts. And you know, the finance industry is a huge industry, and it is very difficult for them to change even forms. You know, everything is also streamlined, and so if they want to change if you want to change one word on a contract, even internally, it goes through so many processes and takes so long. So, you know, like on average, from conceptualization of or let's say willingness to develop an Islamic product, right, up until end, I think it's probably 1 year. Not 1 year of sitting on one's laurels. It's 1 year of active engagement between the company, its lawyers, and the Sharia experts in order to create that. So if it was a mere change of the literals, then, you know, it wouldn't take a year to do that. I think that's that's the one thing. So does it mirror? Does our Islamic Sharia compliant products mirror the conventional products? Yes, it does. In many aspects. And that's another thing. I know it hasn't been part of your question, but the other thing is that, you know, like within a conventional space, you don't expect the conventional financial institution to do everything. Some of the other, when it's an Islamic institution, you expect them to be the Baitul Mal also. You expect them to be the Sadaqah also. You expect them to be the Zakah also, and everything else as well. So I think that type of expectancy also is not, while if you're talking to the community, then other than just having the Islamic financial institutions, we need to have other things in place. And I think that's a very important conversation that we should be having, particularly in today's time. And it's a very, very, I think it's a very, very important conversation that we should be having, because you know, this whole idea of takaful. Like, I mean, if you throw around the word takaful, what do we attribute it to? We attribute takaful to takaful insurance. You know, that's the cooperative model for insurance. From a Quranic perspective, look, takaful is much more than that. Solidarity funding, solidarity spending, and that's a responsibility of us as a community as a whole. And interestingly enough, subhanAllah, you know, the verses that deal with riba, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about that. But maybe at another time we can talk about those verses, you know.
Well, when I listen to you speak, what I hear, and this is something that we always talk about on this podcast, is the fact that we need to still, it sounds like we still need to create awareness. Before education, it seems that we're still at that step of creating awareness before we can move into the phase of education. And really, that's kind of been our struggle. And that is also why we've put together this podcast to, kind of reach out to the community to say, firstly, there are these solutions available. And fundamentally, they are extremely different. However, they do mirror each other, which means that you can still get the same type of returns from specific products, whether it's a savings account or an investment, or even improved returns on the Sharia side versus the conventional side. So we actually had Sheikh Muhammad West on the show. MashaAllah, always very informative, very interactive, wonderful Sheikh West. And one of the comments that he made that really stuck with us, and something that we've been saying for some time, is that this should actually be driven from the mimbar. And I don't know how you feel about that, because what Sheikh West was saying was, just like we eat halal, and we go and we look for the halal stamp and we say, that's halal. Go and invest halal, buy halal, use the, when you bank halal. How do you feel about
No, absolutely. I think that I think it ties into the whole idea which we started off with in terms of it's a complete way of life. And the other thing would be the lifestyle choice that you make. So basically, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying, look, we need to call out to our own constituencies, which is the Muslim community, that when it comes to finance, then you must make the Islamic finance choice. When people make choices, whether it's financial or otherwise, what are they driven by? They're driven by three things. They want to draw benefit to themselves. They want to push away harm. In Arabic, it's referred to as jalbul maslaha, daf'ul mafsada, and there's a higher objective. They want to receive a higher objective. So if those are the reasons why you make a choice, to bring a benefit to yourself, push away harm, and for a higher objective, then those considerations are found within Islam to the highest degree. So in other words, if you're making a finance choice and you want a benefit and you want to push away harm and you want to consider a higher objective, then and you're really serious about that, then you must make the Islamic choice. Because benefit is found there, the repelling of harm is found there, and the higher objective in this instance in terms of the actual preservation, the growth of your wealth, in other words, prudent management of the wealth, those solutions are going to be found within Islam. Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah has a very famous statement in this particular regard, and he says that the entire Sharia, this entire way of life, it's all about benefit for you. So I think Muslims, I think also we should, how can I say, it's like we should invite Muslims to the Islamic finance choice. We should invite them in a beautiful way. Invite them in a manner that creates a desire within them to actually practice upon, and not, we should فَقُولَ لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا لَعَلَّهُ يَتَذَكَّرُ أَوْ يَخْشَى. In kind words, in endearing words, in engaging words, get them to, and why? Because كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ. You are the best of nations. So why would you call somebody that, look, okay, you making lifestyle choices, you making financial choices, but you are not making the Islamic financial choice? In other words, you need insurance. Sure, you need insurance. There's sufficient substantiation for insurance within Islam. You're basically safeguarding yourself against a potential future risk. Can you safeguard yourself against it? Absolutely. Okay, what choice do you have? You can go the conventional way. Or you can go the Islamic way. What we're saying that it's in your best interest that you take the Islamic option. I think, wallahu a'lam, that for some, because we are products of the community that we subsist in, man, and we subsist within a broader secular society. So it's a secular government. You go to a secular school. So secularism is about separating, God. God is on Friday and God is on Sunday. Allah, So I think maybe part of the awareness what you're talking about is to conscientize Muslims that look, man, our Islam is not just a religion; it's a complete way of life, and complete way of life means that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has solutions for you. For every aspect of your life. And the solutions, nobody's expecting you to blindly take on the solutions. You can actually evaluate the solutions, and you can actually compare the solutions, and you'd find that you're better off when you make the Islamic solution from a material point of view, and then obviously from a spiritual point of view, you'll be. Interesting enough, the verse of the Holy Quran, وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ. Normally shifa, we say it's a cure. But Ibn Ashur mentions there that the word shifa, okay, I'm saying this now, but from my understanding what he's saying is perhaps more aptly or correctly translated as solution. So, and remember the other verse in the Quran says, Tibyan likul, it explains everything. So finances is part of, our life, and we need decisions there. And you know what happens normally is a unique thing about, what is it about finance that's so unique? You need to make prudent decisions. In other words, you sometimes make short-term sacrifice for long-term goals. So there's this whole thing of the unknown in the future, man. Look, I mean, you can go with the best, best broker, and he gives you the most sound advice, and it is the best broker. It is the most sound advice, but due to extraneous circumstances, that investment doesn't actually bear the fruit. What is not what was. That can very well happen. When you, as a risk mitigating measure, I'll give you a new risk mitigating measure, Sharia. Make the Sharia decision. You cut, let me say this for the shock value, you cut all of your risk. Why is that? I read Aqlani Liberaliya by Sheikh Abdul Aziz Al-Tarifi. He has his book. He talks about a human being. He says a human being, he can see what's immediately in front of him, but he can't see what. Look at the weather, for example. They can give you fairly accurate, what the weather will be like tomorrow or the following day. But a week, the further we go into the future, the less accurate that becomes. You ask, I don't know what happened to you. You ask a human being what happened. This year, I must draw a straight line from one side to the other side. Very difficult. That's just a line. You ask me, and this happened to me a lot. I like to swim. So I start swimming from the one side, then I'm on the other side of the pool, then I ask myself, how did I end up here? We can't even swim straight. So that's why Allah SWT has given you guidance in the terms of Quran, that look here, I'm guaranteeing you the outcome, where you're going to end up. So you need to make an Islamic, you need to make a financial decision. Make the Islamic financial decision, because Allah SWT has already picked out the outcome there. It's going to be the best of outcomes.
Alhamdulillah.
So, subhanallah.
Subhanallah. So well said. Well, I always think about the youth, and we're really trying to reach out to the youth. The youth have quite a bit of money. They get allowances from a very young age, and they have a lot of spending power. Okay, and when I look at, let's say, my nephews that have now just graduated from matric, and they are maybe unsure of what they want to do with their lives, or where they want to go, or what they want to do. A lot of times, what they want to do is they want to be wealthy. Okay, they want to make money. They want to retire their parents. They want to make things easy for their parents, and inshallah, maybe take a wife, or get a husband, or settle down, those types of things. But in many cases, sometimes we find that some of the messages that, and you were saying, the messages that are driven to the community, sometimes to say that there's a stigma attached to being wealthy, or there's some type of stigma against wealth, in certain cases, because it's seen as an additional test for you. What do you say to that young man that's now looking to go out into the world and really build wealth, build a legacy, but has that kind of what was the word, dichotomy, where they have to deal with this concept of me, I want to be wealthy, I want to do all these things, but if I go out and do that, is that a bigger test for me? How do you consolidate that? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a beautiful question. I can only serve as a conduit for what Quran and the Prophet ﷺ has already said about these issues.
Yeah.
One of the starkest narrations in that and regard, and talks directly to your point. The narration goes, I speak under correction, that it was senior companions in the form of Abu Bakr and Umar. They saw a strapping young lad, and he was going out, and he was in a worldly pursuit. So they said, if only he applied himself in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ overheard him and said, if he's going out to look after himself, in other words, for his independence, then he is in the path of Allah. If he's going out to look after his children, he's in the path of Allah. If he's going out to look after his parents, then he is in the path of Allah. It's an authentic narration. So those type of ideals are good and virtuous ideals. Just last night in a class, we were sitting in Mataratul Qulub, purification of the heart, and they were talking about wealth. So I was mentioning that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about wealth, He says, إِنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ fitna. The word fitna is a test. But the word test doesn't necessarily have a negative connotation attached to it. Like wealth is a test, your family can also be a test. For example, like it's cold now, so you sleep. Now you hear the adhan, but you're nice home, snuggly, and it's very fuzzy and romantic. And then, that's a test for you, because you need to stand up. In other words, what you need to say to Allah is, Ya Allah, this bed is warm and dear to me, but you are dearer to me. So you get up. So your family there is a test to you. We are a test to one another. And وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ fitna. We have made you and I to one another fitna. Because you mentioned that word, so it's important that word in many instances. In some instances, yes, it is used to refer to a bala, which is a trial and tribulation. But in a lot of instances, it's simply stated as a test. And a test, you either pass the test or you fail the test. So it's neutral in that particular regard. So wealth is not by its very nature a bad thing. Then I think to conclude that idea is, there's a narration, I don't know how authentic the narration is, but it says, نِعْمَ الْمَالُ الصَّالِحِ لِلْعَبْدِ الصَّالِحِ. How good is wealth in the hands of a pious slave. Hands in the pious slave. And then, somebody that's considered to be a great spiritual luminary. And when you talk about spiritual luminaries, automatically you go to the idea of asceticism. They preoccupied with the year after and got nothing much to do with the world. A person who sets his foot onto a spiritual pursuit without wealth is like a person going to battle without a sword. Going to battle without battle. How do you go to battle without a sword? So wealth in the hands of a pious person is they call it ni'mal aun. What a good assistant. Our relationship in this world is a simple relationship. It's like a ship on the sea. In order for the ship to sail, it needs the water. The problem is when the water gets into the ship, then the ship is going to drown. But do you need the sea, the water? Yes, you need the water. So it is a means in that regard. And then the problem with wealth is that if you're acquiring the wealth simply to amass wealth, that's a problem. Or due to your avariceness, and avarice is just a euphemism for greed. A person just wants to amass wealth. But a person who seeks to acquire wealth and his intentions are virtuous, then it's a good thing for him to acquire the wealth. Certain of our scholars before, they were poor and indigent, but what they would do is they would consciously go out to earn money so that they meet the minimum taxable amount, so that they can have the honor of dispensing of the alms tax, zakah. If you don't have money, then you deprive of performing that great ritual. Ali Sahib just came back from Hajj now. May Allah grant you Hajj Maqbool Mabrur for him and his wife also, inshallah. May it be a means of goodness for us all and specifically for you. If you didn't have the means to do that, in other words, you didn't have wealth, then you would have been deprived of performing that great act of worship, completely life-changing. I mean, I just was chatting to Ali Sahib earlier on, and he said how life-changing it actually was. Subhanallah. So if wealth is a means, and in Quranic terms also, wealth is referred to as khair, as goodness. But I think that narration of the Prophet ﷺ, I don't know the authenticity thereof, but it's mentioned in Masarat al-Qulub, purification of the heart, that wealth in the hands of a pious person. ذهب أهل الدثور بالأجور, famous authentic narration, that the people of wealth, they've gone with all of the reward. Why they pray as we pray, they. Yeah. So for a person to have aspirations of independence, ما يستغني يغنيه الله. Like Allahumma aghnina bihalalika an haramika wa aghnina bifadlika amman siwak. Oh Allah, make us independent, we don't need other people. So to have that financial independence with those noble intentions, al-umur bi-maqasidi, things are judged by the objectives and the intentions. It's a very, very, very noble thing. But at the same time, also one needs to be wary of wealth, because wealth, it's a test, definitely. And many times there were persons that not everybody who intends goodness reaches it. So you might have the noble intentions in terms of acquiring the wealth, but we also have to be wary of the nature of wealth and the nature of materiality. Like power, almost. They say power corrupts ultimately. Power corrupts ultimately. Wealth, in terms of the world, is we must be wary of it at the same time. But doing that is for a youngster to have those noble and sublime intentions, very, very good thing. I actually feel, what happened is that I came across this verse the other day, or rather the explanation of the verse. And the book I'm reading, it talks about, they talk about the inimitable nature of Quran, that Quran cannot be replicated. So, for example, you take one, the shortest chapters, you get the meaning, and you attempt to articulate that meaning in a way other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala articulated it. You'll never be able to articulate that meaning in a superlative way. So, in other words, the Quran is inimitable in that way. You cannot better it from that sense. Then there's another sense, for example, some would say that if you look at the laws contained in the Quran, so there's a law regarding, let's say, for example, interest. And if you're objective about it and you find that Allah prohibits interest, you look at all of the other alternatives, you're not going to find a law that that's going to outmatch that. And we see the challenges that we have today in that particular regard. So the Quran is inimitable. You can't better it. You cannot bring the like thereof. One aspect which one of the contemporary scholars highlight was the inimitability of the epistemological structure of the verses. In other words, when Allah mentions a point, He mentions it in a particular context. Try how you may and create other context for it. You're not going to be able to develop a better context for that to be mentioned. And let's give example that Allah talks about riba. Allah doesn't simply tell you out of the blue riba is prescribed. No. The context is He talks about solidarity funding. Now once you talk about solidarity funding, which talks more about collectivism than individualism, then thereafter Allah tells you that you should not partake in riba. Then the repugnancy of riba stands out. Where did that repugnancy come from? It came from the context. Because Allah first gave you the good stuff, and then He gave you that, and then afterwards He mentioned zakah. So when you put riba in the middle, you're compromising riba. Because riba now stands out for what it is. It's obnoxious. So, and where did you get it from? Because of the context. So why was I talking about this long thing about
the wealth of the young man?
So what happened was, remember at the beginning we were talking about riba prescribed later in Islam or early in Islam. So some scholars say that riba was prescribed very early on in Islam. So you're talking about a youngster and he wants to be financially independent. When we talk about, if you understand riba to be prescribed in the Meccan period, in the early days of Islam. So normally when we look at Islam history, we broad strokes, we say you have the Meccan period and the Madinah period. In the Meccan period, what was happening? If you liken it to a building, we were laying the foundation. And in the Meccan period, we put the building onto the foundation. In the Madinah period. Right? That's how we normally think about it. Am I talking?
No.
Yes.
You follow.
So Allah bless you, man. No, I'm just thinking that late at night also. I'm also going Zimzam a little bit here, so I'm thinking, if I'm going Zimzam like this, I hope the brothers are okay. So what happened was, so in Makkah we laid the foundation. In Medina we put the building on there. That foundation, normally when you talk about what's it made up of, we say it's made up of the essentials, in other words, the tenets of faith. When I read that verse and the scholar explained, what I came to understand is that the foundation is made up of two things: the tenets of faith and financial well-being. In other words, if that's the foundation, in other words, you can't have the foundation. An essential part of the foundation of Islam is financial well-being. Look at the Prophet ﷺ, why was Khadija so, and we in August is Women's Month, may Allah SWT grant our liege lady the highest place in paradise, and she has the highest place in paradise because of her support to the Prophet ﷺ. What support? Look at how she supported him. She believed in me when nobody else believed in me. So in other words, that's the one part of the foundation. And she supported me without that financial support. In other words, it's just not within the material world that we live in, which is a world of cause and effect, of means. And, laws of causality and all of those things apply. You cannot subsist without finance. So finance is fundamentally important. Imam Ghazali even talks about this whole idea of, okay, so you want to commit yourself to, if you're poor, what happens? You know the narration, كَادَ الْفَقْرُ أَيَكُونَ كُفْرًا, that poverty can lead you to disbelief. Because when a person is so poor, all he's preoccupied with is basically earning a living. So he says that, for example, a person, he wants to study, but he doesn't have wealth. He's not by the means. What's going to happen? Because he's concerned about sustaining himself, he's not going to be able to do the two things that he seeks to free himself up for. And what is that? Dhikr and fikr. Pondering, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِّأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And dhikr being the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You want to do those things, but you don't have the financial support with which to do it. And therefore, from that perspective also, if you look at it, wealth and income plays a very important role. So almost like if you want to be an optimum Muslim, you must be I wouldn't say financially well off, but you must be financially stable.
100%. Well, no, that is very interesting. The view on finance and wealth. But I wanted to touch on the economy today. I mean, how fortunate are we that we almost have a Islamic alternative or an Islamic product, to every conventional product we have in the market. Whether it is a banking account, we've got the Islamic banking account. Whether it's vehicle finance or home loans, we've got Islamic vehicle finance, Islamic property finance, investments as well. And we're living in a time where one could literally have a sharia-compliant product for every stage of your life, whether you're getting married, whether you're saving for Hajj, whether you're looking to buy your first property. And I don't think a lot of people understand that, the opportunity that there is for them is to bank Islamically. But also, if you are not banking Islamically, how easy it is for you to actually switch over from conventional banking or finance to Sharia-compliant alternatives. And if we look in the past, our fathers and maybe grandfathers and great-grandfathers never had that opportunity. And what happened was that, if they were staunched, if they were they wouldn't partake in banking because they didn't want to get involved with riba. There was that concern around that. But today, with all these products, our generation now can not only take up Islamic or Sharia-compliant products, but we also get to partake in the economy. And just like with everything else has come along over time, if we look at Islam in Cape Town, in South Africa, today we have a masjid in every community. We've got Islamic high schools, madrasas, we've got high schools, we've now got Islamic universities, and that's taken over time. And I think the same thing is happening with Islamic finance, is that since Islamic finance has started, and if you compare Islamic finance to conventional, we're quite young as opposed to conventional banking or finance. But you'll see over time we've innovated or created products as we've gone along, and we'll get to a point where there's no question about whether it's Sharia compliant or not. We'll get to a point where every single product that you want to take up or financial decision you make, there will be a Sharia compliant alternative eventually. So again, from a community perspective, I think there's a lot to do from an awareness perspective. And I like the point that you made, and Sheikh West made this point that when we, like you said, when we go for food, we tend to turn the product around to see for a sharia-compliant or a halal stamp certified. But as Muslims, we never saw the animal being slaughtered. We never saw how it was housed. We never saw how it was packaged, how it was kept. But our trust in that halal certification, or halal body, and we accept this. And the same goes with our Islamic products. And where I'm going with this conversation is quite long.
Bismillah, bismillah, go for it. We're listening.
Is that a lot of our people, we see the end product of the product. We see Islamic finance, home finance, Islamic vehicle finance, but we don't see all the work that has gone in to actually create that. You know, with our Islamic boards, our Islamic scholars and our experts to actually bring a product like that to the market so that our community can benefit, that we can partake in the economy, we can finance and invest our money from a sharia. We can save and a profit instead of riba. So again, I don't think our communities understand that. And I think we got a lot of work to do in terms of educating and creating that awareness. I think that's one of the purposes of this podcast. And with that, there was no question coming after that, but it's actually how we're going to end off tonight, inshallah. Well, again, Jazakallah shukran so much for your time. It was wonderful. We've actually gone over our time as normal, but we will definitely be asking one to come back for another episode where we can dive a bit deeper into the harms of riba and some of the other products that are available to our community.
And with that, if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like, a thumbs up, leave a comment, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.